Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Hello, and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. This is the podcast where I interview experts about how to use tools to get people to do what you want. Whether you're speaking in a meeting or you are speaking on a stage or even a one-to-one conversation, there are so many tools that we can use that I'm interviewing experts about how to do that. Today, we're talking to Joie Seldon, who is an emotional intelligence trainer. And this is because leadership is what's behind speaking. Speaking is actually a tool. Presenting in a meeting is a tool. Presenting on a webinar is a tool. It is the leadership behind that, stepping up to say, I am worth it. This is something that's important to me. That is what makes it interesting. And that's really where the reason why we go out and we do these speeches. Joie Seldon is an expert on dealing with our emotions, not suppressing them, but using them. And we talk today about the number one myth about communication. We talked about how women leaders, especially, can use their emotions to grow their careers, to grow their visibility, to really show up as leaders, including dealing with the trouble of tears. What happens if you have tears coming to your eyes? And we talk a lot about perception because it's all about how you are perceived. This was a great conversation. I know you're going to have a wonderful time. And now I'm going to the interview with Joie Seldon. Hello, I'm Elizabeth Bachman of Strategic Speaking for Results. And this is actually Speakers Who Get Results podcast, where I am interviewing the amazing Joie Seldon. We're doing this live because we're going to try to see how this works. And the other thing is, then I get to have people do, shrink this a little bit. We can also have people watch this later on the podcast. So that's the fun part about all this. And I'm setting myself up. I have so many windows open, trying to get it all ready. Okay, so Joie Seldon, welcome to Speakers Who Get Results.
Thank you.
I'm going to start out by telling people a little bit of who you are. You and I have known each other for a while, and we do sort of in the same arena, but you are really in emotional intelligence. We both came from the theater, and that is a theme that I see with so many speakers who started out with the art of great communication in theater, right?
Right.
So official bio is that Joie Seldon, 40 years ago, she dreamed of becoming a movie star. And her struggle for that dream and ultimately falling short of it led to decades of exploration and study of human behavior and emotions. And I think I'm going to ask you about that a little bit later because the statistics are, at least for the opera singers that I worked with, fewer than 5% who study to be an opera singer or study to be a movie star actually get there.
Right.
And then the question is, what do you do next?
Right.
So remind me, or throw that in if I forget to ask you. Well, here's what Joie did next, is that drawing from her unique background as an actor and acting teacher, as well as a somatic psychologist, entrepreneur, and innovator in emotional intelligence, Joie teaches students and clients how to use their emotional state as a creative tool for success. I love that. I think that's very cool.
Great.
She's the author of Emotions, an Owner's Manual, and her online course, Emotions at Work, teaches business professionals how to navigate difficult relationships and the complexities of being human at work. So she's a leadership and presentation skills coach, and she's worked with clients at AT&T, Blue Shield, Wells Fargo, the Project Management Institute, Dolby, and more. She's a dynamic speaker, I can attest to that, who has presented to worldwide audiences both in person and online. So Joie Seldon, welcome to Speakers Who Get Results.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And to our Facebook Live, actually.
Yes.
I start out always with asking people, if you were on stage with interviewing somebody who's no longer with us on Earth, or on this plane, shall we say, who would you like to interview? What would you ask, and who should be listening?
I would have to interview Katherine Hepburn. Growing up, she was my idol. She showed me what a woman could be like that was very different than the women around me, especially my mother. So she gave me inspiration. And I would want to ask her, because her outward persona was so strong and confident, and yet she played a very wide range of roles, from heavy drama to light comedy, and she had this ability to be both very strong and very feminine and sensual. So I would ask her about her internal life, what went on inside of her as she went through this journey. And I think the audience, of course, would be, I think it would be women, but I think it would be great for men to be in the audience, because then they could hear something about what goes on in the interior of women. I think that we have so much going on inside of us that doesn't get seen or heard or expressed, that dictates a lot of how we move through life. And that's what I'd be interested in.
You know, I think that's really interesting. She was one of my favorites too. She went to Bryn Mawr, and my mother went to Bryn Mawr, and I sort of feel like that connection. And my mother was a little like, she reminded me a lot of my mother. And what I was always interested in was how she handled the intense scrutiny of having a public life.
Yeah.
And when I was essentially a private person.
Yes, very private.
And that she came from money. She came from an upper class background, which is a strike against you in sort of public life, most of it, unless you're a prince or princess, you know. So, but people are then ready to, how do we say? People are really ready to condemn you for that.
It's a mixed bag. I think it's a very mixed bag. We envy people who start out with a leg up, so to speak, or they have wealth, or they have that support. And one of the things she also had was an incredibly wonderful mother and supportive mother. She talked a lot. I've read biographies, of course, about her, and she gave a lot of credit to her parents, and particularly her mother, who was very kind of advanced for her times in fighting for women's equality. So she had that part of a background that was the opposite of what I had. So,
you know, perception is a big theme in this podcast that we're recording for. It's a big theme in when I work with presenters, whether you're presenting within a company or you're presenting to on a speech, you know, or you're presenting to promote your program. How you are perceived is so important.
Yes.
And we don't talk much about the cost that public people, you know, what is this perception that I think that coming from money probably didn't help her get jobs as an actress.
Yeah.
You know, she started out as just another ingenue. So that didn't help. And then later, I could see how it would be difficult for her and for her family to have somebody so very public who was also carrying on a years-long adulterous affair with Humphrey Bogart.
And so many. I mean, I think her probably was a very complex life that we only know a little bit about because she was a private person. But there was a number of relationships in her life. From what
well, this is interesting because it all comes to your emotions. And as a performer, but also as a presenter, your emotions are part of your toolbox.
Oh, absolutely.
Perception is such an interesting thing. How you are perceived in the workplace affects whether people listen to what you say.
Yes.
And it also affects how you advance in your career.
Yes.
It affects whether people pay attention to you.
Yes. And what I might add to that is our perception of ourself is equally important as the perception of others that others have about us. And that's a lot of the work that I've done, particularly with women leaders, is how they perceive themselves. And the imposter syndrome is much bigger than more widespread than we would imagine. I've met amazing women, accomplished so much, and yet inside they still have what I call the yada yada of self-doubt, of self-criticism, or holding themselves to very high standards that are difficult to meet. So,
well, and men have the imposter syndrome too. It sometimes shows up in different ways.
Right.
But that's not male or female. That's a human thing. I do think that women stop themselves from stepping out as a leader because they're worried that they have to get it all perfectly.
Yes.
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 Yeah. You said to me something in one of our conversations leading up to this. You said something about how do you deal with the feeling when you think you need to know everything, or you think you need to show that you know everything, and you really don't. So this was actually not on our list of conversations today, but this is where the conversation's going. So this is half the fun.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's great. In fact, I was just thinking about one of my clients who had accomplished a lot. She was a VP in a Fortune 500 company, and she had a family crisis that kind of took the rug out from under her feet for a while. And when she kind of got back into the groove, back into the workplace, and she was leading a big team, she had a lot of self-doubt that she had gotten to a certain level of success, but she wasn't believing in herself in the same way she used to. And she was always second guessing what her boss was thinking of her. And she had a colleague who led another team who actually was very unpopular with his direct reports. And so they were always coming to her for advice. And she was like, am I doing the right thing? And when we began to work with her on her being present with what she named as anxiety, or that tension that we have, which is this general sense of anxiety. But I helped her, and this is part of the work I do around emotions, is to get very specific about what emotions are part of that anxiety. And so when we have this, I have to be perfect, I have to do everything, there's a tension that goes along with it because, first of all, it's impossible to achieve. But there's this tension that we tend to call anxiety. And in fact, anxiety is like one of the number one diagnosed problems and medications that are given in the country. And she began to break down and understand, my anxiety is actually, yes, there's fear. And where's the fear coming from? And there was some anger, and there was some sadness and grief about family losses and things. So where there was this mix of emotion, and the more clear she got about the different emotions that were actually part of this thing called anxiety, she started to recognize how in her mind, how she was projecting this, I have to be perfect in order to be accepted. And that began dismantling, and she began communicating, asking questions, expressing her opinion, because she saw a lot of things going on in her department that needed work, and talking to her colleague who was disliked, and actually telling him, look, your management style is not working very well for you. And over time, it took time, but eventually the colleague changed his management style, and the company moved her boss out of that position and promoted her into her boss's role.
Wow, that's great.
Results of her actually addressing these issues internally created a tremendous success externally.
That's great. And I have a yeah, but here.
Yeah, okay.
One of the things I talk about when you're speaking is to answer the pushback questions, which is for women, often you do have to be better. And there's resentment around that. That's an emotion. But, if a woman, especially if you're the only woman in your position, in your department or in your area, men screw up and then get over it. And women, partly internally, but also externally, if a woman screws up, then they say all women, oh dear, women can't do this. They're held to a higher standard.
That's where when you are more present, and this is one of the things in speaking, right, is when you do your best when you're fully present, when your mind isn't second guessing or you're thinking about how are people perceiving me or how well am I doing.
Yes, right.
Anxiety comes with speaking, but when you're just present and you're clear about what your message is, it's very similar, because what is your intention? What is your message? What are you trying to get across? And when you hold that, there's a confidence. And I do believe that, yes, there is a general, thing of having to prove yourself. But women prove themselves over and over again, and then they don't own the value of themselves. And so they still have this underlying, tension that's trying to impress, or I don't know, whatever it is for that particular person.
Yeah. So, I created and ran an opera company, but I did it. It's done. So does that count? Yeah.
Yeah. So, but you need to carry that forward and hold. It's really important to look at the big picture of who you are, not just these skills at work, because I know for sure women are, generally speaking, have a much broader scale of abilities, capabilities, talents. And I mean, everybody has talents, but women are capable of doing so many things because they have to deal with it at home. They deal with it at work, their family issues. So there's this broad sense of accomplishment and things that all the women I know have had to deal with privately. And I think that there was something that came up in one of the comments about don't bring your personal life to work. And I say you cannot help but bring your personal life to work. So bring it in a conscious, positive way, not in a way that's distracting, but in a way that you recognize the things that you are dealing with and are capable of dealing with. And bring that as part of your arsenal of, like, I say arsenal, I shouldn't use war terms, your treasure chest, your treasure chest.
Toolbox.
A toolbox of abilities and capabilities that you can actually bring to the workplace and use that as a way of holding your own value. Because I tell you, when you hold your own value, other people will start to treat you better.
I love that. That's very, very cool. Joy, tell me, again, perception and communication. Before we did this Facebook Live, we posted some questions on social media, and we got some really interesting answers. We asked what was the biggest myth about communication. And here's some of the answers we got. One was not so much a myth, but a monologue. If you do a monologue and not listen, doesn't help. That's something I deal with a lot, and I've talked about in other podcasts. Also, that using jargon will make you sound smarter. I've got a new podcast episode coming out about this, 2 weeks about this one. And people also say that you have to be an extrovert to be an effective communicator. And I do want to assure anybody who's an introvert, I'm an introvert. I'm a situational extrovert. I've learned how to be extroverted.
Right.
But the one that came up over and over again is thinking you're being understood when you're not. I don't know if that's a myth about communication or if that's just a trap that people fall into, but
Right.
I would love to have you comment on that, because we had a whole bunch of people suggest that was a myth.
I think that's a great answer. And you're right. It may not be a myth, but it is the common problem.
Mm-hmm.
That talking and words is communication. And when you've said them, then you've communicated. But communication is a two-way street, as you know. I'm sure you and your audience knows. Our audience knows it's a two-way street. So people say, "Well, it's about listening." Yes, it's about listening, but it's also here we circle back to perception. Is really noticing who you're talking to and how it's landing with them. So really being emotionally present. So you're not only aware of your own emotions, because if you're angry about something, you're upset about something, and you're trying to communicate, and you have the energy of that, you can have the energy, but how it comes across to the other person is going to dictate whether or not they receive your words in your communication.
Yes.
Because the defenses might, she's angry. My defenses are going to come up to protect myself.
Mm-hmm.
Or she's really upset with me, and oh my God. And then the fear, the fight or flight, all that stuff is happening on a level. And so when you can be really present with a person, if you're angry, you can be angry, but still be calm. Because anger is not really about aggression or violence, which is where it's misused, but it's about its core message is saying, no, I don't like this and want this. There's something not okay about this.
Mm-hmm.
So if you hold that clarity about what the anger is about, and then calm your body without suppressing the anger, then you can stay present with the person and notice how it's landing. And if you see somebody go, like that, or yeah, right, or whatever the reaction is, you say, hey, hold on a second. Something just happened then, and I'm curious how you're perceiving this or how you're receiving this. You slow down and pay attention, and then address from moment to moment what's happening in that conversation, in the communication. And if you're in a room and you're to have a team meeting and you're leading the meeting and you're communicating something important, you need to pay attention. Are people on their cell phones? Are they looking down? Are they tweeting or whatever, texting under the desk or whatever? And really make sure that you have people's attention, and you not call them out, but you say, hey, so and so, I noticed. Is this clear? Maybe you want to let me know how you perceive this, so that you really take the time as a leader, particularly, to stay present with your own feelings, but to really notice everybody else's. Mm-hmm. And then that's how you can tell whether it's communicated or not.
So that's actually a biggest problem with communication. What's the biggest myth?
That it is about words and a logic. That communication is about words and logic.
As opposed to?
As opposed to intention, what you really want, the emotional undertone or the emotions that are behind that communication, and the emotions in the person that's being, that you're communicating to.
That falls into one of the things I'm saying to speakers a lot is only 7% of what people perceive about you and what people take in, if you will, comes from your words. And the other 93% is how you deliver them, how you look, how you act. It's the emotional cues.
Yes.
It's the emotional cues.
Right. And so that they can connect to you emotionally, right? The audience needs to feel something as well as hear the words of it. So if you're speaking, I was one of the trainings that I did. I mean, I certainly brought my acting background into my speaking, but I did speaking circles. And there's a thing called relational presence. And it's really about recognizing the connection that you have with everybody in the audience, so that you really need to be paying attention and looking at your audience. And if you see, you can feel the energy. That's the other thing about it. You can feel the energy, right? If it's like, something's a little dull here, or you're noticing people aren't paying attention, address that when you're speaking. Either shift something you're doing, or saying, I'm noticing it feels a little dull. I've done that. It feels like the energy just went low. Let's see what we can do. to be kind of honest in a way. I mean, there's different situations that you would handle differently. But I think that's a really, really important part. And that's where being really connected to your body and your own emotions is important.
The biggest myth is that it's just words and logic.
Yeah, words and logic.
And it's really who you are in the room.
Yes.
I remember a colleague of mine who spent years in the startup world, and she was pro bono advising a young startup because she was interested. And she said, "Oh yeah, I'm going down to a pitch session, and there's a whole bunch of like 12 different startups who are pitching to a funder. We'll get it, of course, because everybody else is young and they don't know how to they don't know how to be who they are in the room. And I know I've been in here so many times. It's because of who I am in the room that we're going to get the funding, because nobody else believes that." And I just thought, oh yeah, who you are in the room. That's a really good way to put that.
Yes.
So I've got two then big questions. We kind of talked about what role that emotions play when it comes to women leaders. And for that matter, what the heck are emotions? We think we know, but you've told me that you've said it's not what I think. So what is it, Joy?
Emotions are a physical or biological information system. And their purpose is to prompt you to action that is ultimately beneficial for your survival and your well-being. Emotions communicate through the body. You feel very physically different when you're feeling angry than when you're feeling sad, right? And because they are directing you to different types of action. And the action is either to move you away from harm, death, pain, or towards pleasure and creativity and fulfillment. So they are moving you away from harm or towards fulfillment. That's their function.
So what about the emotions that are hooked up with imposter syndrome, who are clearly trying to keep you safe and make you hide?
Right. It's a dysfunctional way of the emotions because of the way we're interpreting them. And this is part of our belief system. All emotions are subjective. We come into the world pure, innocent beings, and then you move into all the conditioning. It's not that your people are bad or are terrible, but it's just the human condition is very complex. And so you get in messages through family, through society, through media, that colors your interpretation of what it is that you're feeling. When you're around kids, they can be crying one minute and laughing the next minute. And, it's very quick, and emotions are supposed to come and go. Bring you the information, you feel it, you get it. And then once you understand that and take the action, whether it's an external action or an internal action, which is like just a recognition of your own belief or something that goes on inside of you, then the emotion goes away. Sadness is the one that kind of has its own timing and can linger because the loss of something, of someone, or something that it has great value to you can take time to process through. But they are meant to bring you, and they have a signature piece of information. Each primary emotion is telling you a very specific type of action and meaning. And so the more we can stay present with our emotions and understand, the sadness is about loss. Fear, if my life is not in direct threat of death or dying, then fear's messages, stop, pay attention. There might be a threat, but there might not. So we interpret things too quickly, and that's part of the whole process of emotional intelligence.
So as a leader and as a woman, what role do the emotions play?
They play a huge role. First of all, we've been taught that our emotions are a weakness. I think it's getting better now, but I know I come from, anyway, I won't go into my background, but the So we think that this emotionality, especially in business, especially in the workplace, is a weakness. And the problem with that is that it cuts us off from a tremendous resource. Our emotions are bringing us information, and so they are actually a part of our personal power. And when women can learn to really accept that, oh, my sensitivity, and I do work with a lot of women who are very sensitive. They've been told their sensitivity is, you're too sensitive. I was told that, oh, you're too sensitive. And so we think there's something wrong with us because we're sensitive. But the truth is, we're very perceptive. We're very attuned to this resource of our emotions. And so it's actually a power. And when we can stay present with it and then make conscious choices, emotions are not supposed to make our decisions for us. We're supposed to get the information. Say, oh, this guy, this person or another woman, I mean, believe me, I had a lot of stories about women being very cruel to people in the workplace, is really making me angry right now. But if I yell at them, it's not going to work. That's not going to be okay. So I have a choice. I can either stuff it, I can express it inappropriately, or I can take the message, process it, think, what am I going to do with this information, and then make a conscious choice about what I'm going to do. So it can be a huge power, and it can also help women connect with employees, with the direct reports, with colleagues, with customers, with the audience.
I'm not going to ask you all the aspects of what you do. If anybody's listening is interested, contact Joie Seldon, because she's got she can take you through this whole process. But let me ask you about the big one. What if something hurts you and your eyes start leaking tears?
Yes.
That's good.
Yes.
What do you do about tears?
The thing is, you acknowledge them and don't apologize for them. That's something, we've all heard it. Women apologizing. Oh, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize for it. Just say, oh, I notice I'm crying. I have tears. This is affecting me. And it's hard, but if you can slow down in the moment, take a breath. I heard a story of one woman who actually said, excuse me, I'm going to go to the restroom for a little bit and then I'll be back. She went to the restroom, had a good cry, let it out, then came back and dealt with what it is that she needed to deal with. So it's not that you have to just stand there bawling in front of people, but they come for a reason. And if we count that, if we dismiss it, if we think there's something wrong with us, then we're losing the value of that message that it's bringing. And it's very powerful to be emotionally present with someone and let them in, because then they're affected.
Do you lose all credibility when someone says something and you say, that hurt? I think I have to think about that one.
Oh, I don't think so. Okay. No.
At least nowadays you don't, thank God.
And I think one way to do that, because sometimes just saying that hurt might be a little abrupt for someone, but you can say, I have a feeling about that came up in me when you said that. Do you mind if I share that? People will inevitably say, oh, sure, okay. When you said that, I felt hurt. And if the more specific you can be, I felt discounted. I felt disrespected, and it's that I using that I language. So it's not you made me feel disrespected. It's like, when you said that, I felt really disrespected. Did you mean to disrespect me? Can you help me understand why you said what you said? Because it doesn't feel good. And that's another place.
And often there's fear in there too.
Absolutely.
So the tears might be that hurt and now I'm afraid.
Yes, absolutely. If fear is that, I always say, if I'm only going to teach about one emotion, it's going to be about fear, because fear colors so many other things, right? It colors our fear of feeling other emotions. Because tears come, sometimes they're about sadness, sometimes they're just about stress, or they're about the emotion wells up. There's a lot of emotion going on all at the same time. And so it's a very natural mechanism to release that so that you can be present.
Then let's expand on this a little bit more. And how can women use their emotions as a positive tool for career success?
To listen to them, to value them, pay attention, honor them. They are bringing you important information. Then you do need to look at as this emotion defensiveness on my part. So it's both looking externally and looking internally for why I'm feeling that. Because sometimes it's my own defensiveness coming up, but I feel threatened because I feel a sense of powerlessness in that moment. Oh, I realize I'm feeling powerless. Am I powerless? No, I'm not. So it's slowing down, taking a moment, and sometimes it takes time. You have to say, can I get back to you?
Yeah.
I have a lot going on right now. I need to process through this. Own it, because ultimately it is a huge power, and it's a way that's going to help you as women to really connect. And one thing we all need in our lives, it is vital for our human thrival, is connection. And the more you can actually create connection, and then you can have empathy with the other person. You know, you can say, you said that was a little harsh what you said, and I'm curious what's going on with you. It helps you to be present in a way that's very powerful and owning your value. Certainly
one of the ways that that my clients have been able to use that is if they're told, you were too mouthy, you spoke too much, you really shouldn't have been out there. Or on the other hand, they say, how come you didn't speak enough? Because last time you were told you spoke too much, and so now you're being quiet.
Yes.
One of the things that you can do if somebody says, oh, you're talking too much in that meeting, is to find out, well, how exactly? Get somebody to define it and say, is that because I'm a woman? Or was I really talking too much? Did it sound like I didn't know what I was doing? I do know what I'm talking about. What makes you say that?
Yes.
Do you help people with that kind of thing?
Yes. How do you communicate? Because we all need feedback.
Yeah.
And women do tend to, and I've done it. My husband, I have to say, has helped me with this, get into too much detail. So, in a setting, in a team meeting, if you're leading the team meeting, you're contributing, you want to be as succinct as possible. So sometimes women do go on and on, and in a chatty conversation with your girlfriend, it's fun, it's great. And leading a team meeting or contributing to anyone at work, conciseness is really an asset. So part of this is being willing to get feedback and not get defensive about it. It's learn about yourself, learn how what's your style. And you can always go to find someone that you trust at work and say, I'm working on improving my leadership skills, my communication. I'd love a little feedback. Do you mind giving me a couple of things that you notice that maybe I could improve upon?
If you ask for that kind of help before you go into the meeting, you are less likely to go off on a tangent. Because going off on a tangent is something that women and creatives do. Plenty of men who are very creative or excited, and they get excited about something, and then they'll go off telling you way more about the details than you really want.
Oh, yes. Men are, this is not a woman's thing alone to talk too much. I definitely.
Well, and not so we're talking too much, but going off on tangents.
Yes.
So, make a plan before you go into that meeting of how you're going to be concise.
Like speaking, you want to be prepared. You want to know so well that if something surprising happens or you have an interaction with somebody in the audience, I do advocate interactive presentations where you're having a dialogue. Even if you're doing most of the talking, you're having a dialogue. But,
Oh, Joie Seldon, this has been amazing. Tell us, I'm going to ask you about one thing, to leave us with one thing, but before we do that, tell us how we can find out more, and how can we find out more about your online course?
Well, the online course, you can go to www.emotionsatwork.online. And you can see a layout of the different modules. There's 4 Zoom calls, live Zoom calls. It's a self-guided 8-week course, but you can participate in live Zoom calls, which have been really, really fun. Ask questions. It's a fantastic platform. So emotionsatwork.online, or go to my website, joieseldon.com, and it's JOIESELDON.com. You can get the first chapter of my book for free by going to my website and get a little video that comes from the online course as well.
Oh, that's fabulous. Joie Seldon, thank you so much for being with me today. We're on Facebook Live, and we are this will be a podcast for speakers who get results.
Thank you.
You have one thought to leave us with.
That emotions happen in the body, and the quickest way to calm your nerves, calm your anxiety, if you're speaking or whenever, is to come into your body, feel your feet on the ground, feel the lower part of your body. There are various techniques that you can use. Breathe and just come into your body and start to develop a sense of trust. It's a wonderful way to calm your nerves and turn towards your emotions. Don't try to suppress them.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, this has been Elizabeth Bachman, and we're recording this for the podcast Speakers Who Get Results, and I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.